We're live, 7:01. It just clicked right at 7:01, right when I started. I was hoping to get it in by 7. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight we are going to talk about the video that I just posted up today that I worked on, and it is entitled, or really, it's about whether or not you should run ported heads when you run turbo motors, because we've talked about this many times on these various live feeds and in some of the other videos as well. When should I port my heads? And there's lots of information out there in internet land. People talking about, you don't have to ever do that. That's just silly. You don't need it. Or people talking about, oh yeah, you should always do that. And the answer obviously is always, as always, almost all the times we have these conversations, it's somewhere in between. First of all, I would argue that we have to narrow down exactly which one we're talking about. Or if we're just talking about LS heads, then we can start our conversation there. If we're trying to talk universally, all cylinder heads, do you need to port any cylinder head with boost? The answer is, again, maybe. It's not always no, because you can run lots of boost. But the thing is, as we've shown, and I showed in this video, even with a good set of heads, factory heads like an LS has, you can still make more power if you have a good set of heads, ported stock ones or aftermarket heads. Either one of them on the LS will do about the same thing. I've run lots and lots of head tests, and we've demonstrated that. So you can get really good power airflow from porting stock heads. There's a lot of really good guys out there. We got a bunch of stuff back from my buddy Brian at Brian Tooley Racing, or actually when he owned Total Engine Airflow. And there's lots of other guys. There's lots of guys that have developed really, really good programs, and you can even port them yourself. So there's lots of ways to go about it. The question really isn't so much, do ported heads help with your application? They will definitely help you make more power. We've shown that on lots of NA motors. We've shown that on lots of boosted motors. The thing is that if they help your NA combination, which is what I always go back to, what I always start with, if they help your NA combination, they're going to help your boosted combination. And they will do that at some point. Your motor will want more head flow, and it will respond to more head flow. On the 4.8s and 5.3s, it responded almost immediately. But the more motor that you have, the more it is able to take advantage of it. Because let's face it, if you have a mild cam 4.8 and you have stock heads on it, they're actually going to work fairly well. If you then port that head or put an aftermarket head on it that flows more than 300 CFM and enough to support 600 horsepower, and you're still making 400, you have way more cylinder head than you need. So there can be an argument for that particular application. Do you really need it, and is it going to benefit? Because if it's not going to benefit a lot naturally aspirated, it's also not going to benefit a lot under boost, because boost is just going to multiply whatever your starting point is. So if you're starting with 400 and you're around near 15 pounds, then all of a sudden you're going to be making 800. Ported heads are not going to help you in that particular instance get there any better, because if they didn't add NA power, they're not really going to do very much under boost. That's a fairly good rule of thumb. Like all these rules, it's not hard and fast. There's probably an application where it would help a little bit with boost and not NA, but we could go into that later on. There are lots of applications, engine families, where they don't benefit from what an LS has, or they may benefit even more, like some of the 4-valve stuff, Honda stuff, and Coyotes. They have really good heads already. Maybe we would be less inclined to want to port those. But again, if you're trying to make lots of power, the stock head, no matter what it is, I know that they didn't design that head and develop that head to maximize the power output. They never do. That's never an OEM thing. They are never trying to get the maximum amount of power, because they always have to sacrifice something else. They're looking for so many other things. They're looking for cost is a big thing. They're looking for emissions. They're looking for fuel mileage. They're they're looking for so many different things, drivability, idle quality, all these things that have nothing to do with, hey, we need to hog this port out and make it really, really flow and make lots of power. They're also looking for average power production and all these things that would not be the thing always that we're looking for. So you can almost always gain airflow from porting on almost any head. You can therefore then potentially gain NA power if you have enough combination to go with it. You would then potentially gain airflow and power once you have your turbo combination, because the turbo is just going to multiply what was their NA. If we gained it NA, we're going to gain it under boost, and away we go. So the question isn't an absolute. It isn't we always do that and it's always going to be beneficial. It isn't we're never going to do that. You don't need to do that with boost. You can just get everything that you want out of boost, because that's not true either. If we can get power gains from heads, which we've seen time and time again, we definitely do, because if it makes more power NA, it's going to make more power under boost. And then that would allow us to reach any given power level at a lower boost level. There's more to it than that. So this is why we always have to discuss these things, because a lot of people out there will tell you, oh, that's just silly. And the argument, if we narrow all of this down and get rid of the 5-liter Mustangs of the world, or 882 headed small blocks of the world, or peanut ported headed big blocks, or Coyotes or Ferraris or Lexus or whatever it is, if we're just focusing on the LS engine family, and we'll focus on that for a minute, because that's kind of where all this came to be, and it's probably the most common thing that people would get wrecking yards from the junkyard and put a turbo on it and put a camshaft in it and then decide whether or not. So the argument for those of you who are not familiar, the argument is you can take a 5.3 or a 6-liter, you can put a camshaft and springs in it, you can put a turbo on it, and then make lots of power with a turbo. 100% easy to do. In fact, I normally recommend people that I get comments and questions and emails and stuff all the time. Hey, do I need to do this? Look, if you're sub 1,000 horsepower for an LS application, and especially more so for the 4.8 than the others, but if you're sub 1,000 horsepower and that's your goal that you want to make, you don't need to port the head. It will help if you port the head, you'll get there at a lower boost level. But if you have a 1,000 horsepower turbo and you can put a cam and a 5.3 and springs and just run that and not have to worry about porting the head, that's even better. The next option up from that, and I would always recommend this actually, because I think it's a really good idea. If you don't spend the money on a full porting, like a stage 2 porting from Total Engine Airflow or Texas Speed or anybody else, if you're not going to do that, which you don't have to at this power level, but there's nothing stopping you from doing porting that will definitely be beneficial. You can unshroud the valve. You could do very minor bowl work. You could, on the 862 and 706 heads, put a bigger valve in it, because that seems to help. You could do those things and get gains from them. It will definitely show more power, and it will definitely show more power under boost. Again, then allowing you, because remember, everything that you do under boost is then going to be everything that you do NA is going to be multiplied when you go under boost. So it will be nothing but beneficial. You will make more power at less boost. So that's good. For the 1,000 horsepower stuff, you can just take an LS motor, put a cam and springs in it, and then turn the boost up and get to where you want to go. That's very, very easy. That's another option. Where I start considering this, and this is what we did with the Big Bang stuff, because I was looking at, when we were originally doing this, the goal was to find out how much power the stock short block would take. That's the thing that I was concerned about. And we did some with aftermarket heads, and we did some with ported stock heads. And we didn't have any sealing problem, because the concern for a factory head with some people out there in LS land, the concern is that the deck thickness of the stock head is thinner than it is on an aftermarket head. And that's 100% true. If you look at an airflow research head or a trick flow head, most of the aftermarket things, they're going to have a much thicker deck than the factory does. So if the deck is thicker, theoretically, they should be able to, hold more cylinder pressure before they would distort and allow boost or something to get past the head gasket. That 100% makes sense. The point that I made in the video is that I doubt anybody that you talk to that tells you that they're an expert at this and gives you some sort of absolute answer on this. I know for certain that they don't have any data to support that. They don't know what that level is. They don't know and it's never going to be a boost level, and that's what everyone's going to want. Well, will it take 10 pounds of boost? Yes, it'll take 10 pounds of boost. But 10 pounds of boost could be 700 horsepower, or it could be 1,000 horsepower. It could be 700 foot-pounds. It could be 1,000 foot-pounds. It depends on what you started with and then added that boost to. So in terms of the sealing potential of a factory head and its attending deck thickness, it's going to be a cylinder pressure number, basically. So I know that nobody out there can tell me what that cylinder pressure is, because it might not even be a one-time cylinder pressure. It might be cycles of that cylinder pressure, and after the 5th one or the 10th one or the 10,000th one, maybe then it lets go. But again, I guarantee you, nobody can tell you that. They won't be able to say, hey, look, it will do this, and it won't do one number over that. Because that level of, like, that the Society of Automotive Engineering's level of testing that would be required to do that would be exhausting and cost prohibitive, and nobody's ever done it. Just to say that the thicker deck is definitely better, we can all make that statement. We know that that's going to be the case. But where that trade-off is the thing that I always talk about. Oh, yeah, you can't do that, because then people will say, look, there's no sense in putting, so the consensus is with a lot of people out there spewing this, is that there's no reason to put, you shouldn't ever port your head, because you can make all the power that you want with a stock head flow, and then it's not going to do you any good, because you're going to get to the point where deck thickness is going to let go and with just boost, and then you won't get any benefit from it. That's 100% wrong, as demonstrated by many of my big bang things where we ran ported either aftermarket heads or ran and even the stock heads. When we ran the stock heads, ported stock heads, we got to very high power numbers where something else let go that was not the deck thickness of the head. We're going to lose a connecting rod and or a piston, I think, before that happens. So we didn't get there with my thing. That's not saying that guys racing aren't doing something different, and they're not maybe running way more power than we did. Maybe they're running more boost. Maybe I don't know what they're doing actually on the track, because I don't know what their tune is. I don't know what their camshaft is. I don't know how much timing they're running. I don't know any of that stuff. But even if they got to that point, my guess is on a stock bottom end, they probably would get to the limit of one of these parts before braking. Maybe that's not the case. But again, we don't really know that. We don't know if we get to that limit before we get to the ceiling limit. You know, that's just not. And I could go out on the internet and search and get anecdotal evidence. Maybe looking at what the new stock bottom end record that I was looking at online from, I think Jonathan has that, has continuing to drop that. So he's probably running a lot of power on the stock bottom end, and maybe he's already gotten to the point where a stock head, the stock deck thickness would be exceeded, that limit would be exceeded, yet the stock bottom end stuff is still working. I don't know. I don't have enough information on that to figure that out. But I'd like to see what that number is. But at any rate, I know that we can get, when we get into the point where I know ported cylinder head will help, because it will help even at 5 pounds. It's going to help. At 10 pounds, it's going to help. At 15 and 20 and 25, and all the way up into and past this 1,000 horsepower thing that I like to use kind of for the, I wouldn't do much because it's easy for guys to make it and you don't have to port it. You can then take the next step, port it yourself. You can then take the next step and port stock heads and do that, because that's usually less expensive than getting an aftermarket head. If I was going for 1,500 horsepower stuff and up, I would get good heads for it, because you're trying to make a lot of power. You want to do the other things that are required to make lots of NA power. Then you multiply that, plus you have the thicker deckness. So for me, the no man's land, or the land where we would discuss this, would be between the 1,000 horsepower and then the range that we ran the big bang motors at. That would be the area where I would be interested in having a discussion and saying it's not absolute. I already know that it's not absolute from lots of other applications that are not LS applications. On a small block Chevy, I would definitely port the head because they're not very good. In that case, I might also go to an aftermarket head, just because even a ported stock head is still not very good. But there's lots of other stuff where, and the thing that I like, and I pointed this out in the video that I did a number of different ways, that we showed that whenever you add something, like we added a camshaft, we ran the stock one, we ran extensively modifying one that had heads cam and intake manifold on it, to show when you're making a lot of NA power and then you want to make a lot of boosted power, that, man, you start making, if you have a good NA combination, you start making lots and lots of boosted power with very, very little boost. And in my opinion, that's always better. I know that the numbers, the peak number is going to be the same. The cylinder pressure is probably going to be the same. Although if we extend the RPM range out with camshaft and stuff where we're making more NA power and you're running more RPM to do that, you're actually probably going to make the thing safer, because you're going to be making that big horsepower number without a commensurate big or with a smaller commensurate big torque number, which I think is probably the thing that would get to the point of the deck thickness problem and or a connecting rod problem and or a piston strength problem. I think it's going to be a cylinder pressure deal. So if you could help eliminate that by stretching the thing out at a higher engine speed, I think that that's probably beneficial. So there's my case for that. As always on all of these things, should I run a long runner intake or short runner intake? It depends. Where are you running it? Let's talk about that. There's no 100% absolutes either way. It's not all in one way or all in another. Just like with everything in life, if you're all in on one thing and you're and everything on this side's bad, you probably don't have enough information. And that's exactly what's going on here. And so that's what this video was about. It's got lots of good information on it. The one that I posted, showing the differences, what happens when we put a cam in it, what happens when we put cam in heads. I even have a cylinder head, a direct back-to-back head test. In this case, we did do an aftermarket head, but we went from a stock 706 head to a trick flow 205 head, which is a really good head. But it just shows what the more head flow does, because we weren't in a range where deck thickness was a concern for either one of the heads, because even on a factory 706 head, I think we were only around 600 horsepower. So we're not anywhere near the danger zone, since we know that we've been more than 2 or 3 times that amount. So we're not at that area yet. But we know that the head made more power. It made more power under boost. In fact, if anything, when I went back and looked at that, when we put the head on there, the boost dropped a little bit. So it wasn't even exactly a precise test with those two. And it was run with a stock camshaft. With anything, we would have gotten more of a gain in power from replacing that head with a ported 205 head if we would have had a cam on both of the heads to start with. There would have been more of a gain, and then we would have started out higher NA, and then we would have ended a lot higher with more boost and all of that stuff. So that's my opinion on that, and the opinion backed up by some of the data. But as we get into that range, really it's kind of just opinion. It's what you like and what you don't like, and what your finances are going to dictate. Some guys just aren't going to do it, because even if they wanted to port it or put a ported stock head on, they're just not going to do it because they can't afford it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you turning the boost up. Turning the boost up is free. And if you can still get to where you want to go, that's fine. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on. I obviously got to get a poll doing. Do you run ported head or heads on your turbo motor? So do you run a ported head or heads if it has 2 of them? It could be a single on your turbo motor. So let's see what people think about that. I have been had been for a long time a real staunch advocate of making lots of NA power. Most of the stuff that I dealt with before getting into turbos fairly heavily was that I ran a lot of, because my first boosted thing was a Vortex supercharged Mustang. So we always tried to make as much NA power as we could, because we knew that translated to 2 things that we liked. One, it translated into more power with the blower, but it also tended to, well, it didn't tend to, it always dropped the boost level on the blower too. So I always liked the idea of getting more power at lower boost, because in my opinion, that's a better combination. If you can lower the boost, I know that most guys are running this stuff through an intercooler, and the intercooler is going to take out the vast majority of that heat. But if you can drop your combination by 10 pounds, even from 30 pounds down to 20 pounds, and make the same amount of power or make more power, and you drop the boost that much, that has to help even coming out of the intercooler. The intercooler is not going to take out all of that excess. It doesn't normally do that. It's going to take out a percentage of that excess, but it's always better. And then the higher the boost level that you have to run, the higher the attending back pressure is going to be. And I need to go back, because after thinking about this, I need to go back and look through my data and see is the back pressure the same at the same power level, regardless of the boost. I don't think that it is. So I'll have to take a look at that. Let's see what you guys got going. Richard, the Turbo Trailblazer SS running stock LY6 heads. A stock LY6 head won't work with the Trailblazer SS intake manifold because one of those is a rec port and one of them is a cathedral port unless you have adapters. A stock LY6 will run an LY6 intake manifold, which is basically the rec port version of, it looks like a Trailblazer SS, except it's a rec port version. But the Trailblazer SS is actually a cathedral port intake manifold. Not many people have real access to real-time cylinder pressure data. I mean, no, that's very, I don't see that hardly anywhere. Some guys from Vermont crossing into Canada. It turns out he's a fellow Sloppy Mechanics member. There's probably a lot of those. Matt has a good following. So, Karlov, did you go out and run your best yet? Richard, what do you know about white performance small block foreheads? I see it looks like a monkey ground with confusion of other white performance shots, but they're now offering AFR small block foreheads at a good price. I know one of those is a knockoff of the other one, the Skip White guys, and then somebody else used their name, or there was two of them doing it and they split, or something was going on with that. And I don't know which one is which, and I haven't used any one of their stuff though. Yeah, James, I'm scrolling back and take a look at some of the stuff he's recommending. Get 240 get the rec port heads instead of 317s or 243 799s for your 6 liter because they'll fit on there and they will definitely make more power. You'll catch the 6 a.m. Pacific show tomorrow. All right, man. Let's see. We need a poll. I wasn't even looking over there. I was just focused on camera. But we do have a poll up. Let's see. Wow, we're at an even split here. 51% saying no, that they don't run a ported head on a turbo motor, and 49% saying yes, they do. Maybe you want to put a K-swap, even though I put in an old Toyota engine. That's how I like building reliable NA to big power turbos. So the forged flat tops with nice reliefs fall into that nice to do, or just run a stock dish on an LY6. I'm sold on porting the rec ports already. Running a forged piston is a good idea because there's going to be more strength. You may be able to get to the power limit. There's no absolute answer there either. It depends. You can get away with enough camshaft to make lots and lots of power with a stock piston. You can get away with even more camshaft if you run a forged flat top piston that has valve reliefs in it. That's really what the valve reliefs do, is they help you run more camshaft. If you're running a turbo LS, chances are with almost any 4.8, 5.3, or 6.0, you can put enough camshaft in it to make more power than you'll need. Dwell time at peak cylinder pressure makes a difference with head sealing. Well, except for the 4.8, all the other ones are going to have the same dwell time because they're going to have they have the same crankshaft. 5.3, the 6.0, and the 6.2. Ported the head on my 85 Pontiac Sunbird. I don't know if it helped the power. I'm sure that it did. That's the thing that I would not be able to do. I would not be able to port a head and not know what the before and after flow numbers were. I would have to know what those are. I have to know if I did something. Richard, yesterday prep track testing. Pro sticky track is all or nothing. Once it spins, it doesn't move. Wasn't good for my setup. Better mile an hour, but not a good 60 foot. Manufacturers don't put port heads on production turbo cars, so I guess they'll run them with non-ported heads. Okay. So are your needs the same as the production ones are? RPO code LC8. What is that? The rec port heads come with Inconel exhaust valves, a factory LS application that has factory Inconel exhaust valves? To answer your question, no, professionally prep track wasn't good for me. Okay, yeah, we got that. Yeah, James, the 6.0s with the rec port heads are really good. Ever since I ran that LY6, I've been kind of a fan of that. Mike, they do. They come here for all the knowledge and the fun and the camaraderie and the car guy talk, and they can't even hit the like button. We all can't live the dream. Ported heads are not needed on a 6-liter to make big power. Ported 317 heads with big valve will make power. They will. I think an L99 with gap rings would be a good turbo motor. Yes. You don't need the higher compression LS3 stuff. You can do it with a 5.3, so it doesn't matter. Yep, Alan's got it right. Mike's got it right. They're good peeps. Richard, do you ever design manifolds with equations on paper or computer? No, I don't. Or you mock stuff up most of the time and adjust. I always like adjusting because I like having the dyno tell me what works and what doesn't work. And I like going through that process. Plus, the actual math for an intake design is pretty complex. Machine shop I'm working at is making titanium valves for Corvettes. The LS7 has titanium valves, right? Todd, you got 243 heads. Those are going to work good. The LC8 was a 6-liter built for CNG fuel. Needed better valves because of the dry fuel. Okay, that makes sense. See, I'm not familiar with that. I'm not familiar with the CNG stuff. LC8 GM natural gas or propane prep 6-liter trucks, optional in 2011 and 2009 heavy-duty trucks. I remember them talking about, and I didn't know that it was that motor, but I remember them talking about continuing to offer the cathedral port headed motors well into the LT stuff, right? I see, since I don't have a dyno, I have to rely on theory if I want to complete my custom build truck. Where's Turbo Monza? I talked to him a couple of days ago. Just checking in about the heads. What's our poll doing? 53% saying yes on the ported heads on our turbo motor. Even CFD simulations of manifolds aren't really accurate. The amount of things that are going on a multi-cylinder engine with, and these are only 3 forms, the 3 forms of charge filling, and airflow and cam timing and all. It's a lot. all of the books that I have that do give me calculations that I can't understand, they're all for single cylinder engines too. So they're not, there's a lot going on there. Let's scroll back here. Let's see. People have no concept of how hard 1500 horsepower is on the whole car. That's a lot. Yeah, they don't have 1500 horsepower transmissions or drive shafts or rear ends or brakes or tires or axles or drivers, or all of the new L8Ts have in-canal exhaust valves too. I have a question about a GM 2003 V6. If they're all the same. The same as what? Project update, got the new cooling system running on my 27 with an 871 old school 392 Hemi. Very cool. A new radiator shroud fan. So I'm now 170 max temperature so far. Fingers crossed. We're sending you good luck vibes. I've been relying on the entire back catalog videos on this channel for my build. Most of the time I think of a question, you just go to it. It's probably there. And if it's not there, then you probably can interpolate it from other different results from different videos. What kind of power should a stock with a cam LQ9 hold? Well, take a look at the 6-liter Big Bang stuff. That's what the short block will hold. So a cam and springs 6-liter. I don't know if are you doing other stuff? Are you putting rain gap in it? Are you putting head studs on it? What are you doing? Running out of weather here in Illinois for a turbo car. Yeah, it's probably, is it starting to get cold and rainy? Curious as to why it would be better not to port. It's not better. It's not better not to port. It's just that it's not necessary. So like if we wanted to make 1,000 horsepower, you just put a cam in a 5.3 and you're at 425 or 430, let's say, and then it doesn't take very much boost to reach 1,000 horsepower. So you don't need to port the head. But if you want to get to 1,500, then you got to start looking at stuff like that. Did some draggy times with my diesel Q7 today after a ton of maintenance. Cut 1 second off the 0-16 quarter mile times. Nice. I like those draggies. Those are pretty cool. Those are the modern interpretation of a Vericom. If I welded little heat fins on the cylinder head runners, can I make it cool? Sure. And then put screens in it and then run coolant through the screens. You had frost in North Dakota. Yeah. I think it was 90 here today. I'm always in the headspace of 2.2, which means not porting doesn't get you very far. That's one of the heads like a 5-liter Ford head, although a 5-liter Ford head I probably would just replace. But in this case, that's not a good flowing head. Even for its displacement, it's not a good flowing head, and there's no aftermarket replacements. Although if somebody did send me a link, I didn't know that Speedmaster actually makes a reproduction of that aluminum head. I've never seen one, and I've never flow tested it or anything, obviously, but it'd be interesting to see how it compares to a stock head. But if all you have is a stock one and there are no aftermarket versions of that available that flow better, then you have to port the stock one. And we will be doing head porting on those when we test it. What is the best standalone ECU? I don't know. And I don't know what your definition of best is. I don't know what you're trying to do. None of the ECUs will give you more power. If they can adjust the timing and the air fuel, then you'll get the power out of the motor. ECU choice is usually for ease of use if you understand all of the things, and then for all of the options that you want. Do you want traction control? Do you want ABS? Do you want boost by gear? How many data logging channels do you want? You know, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into that. What is the cost? Do you want to spend like Motec kind of money? Do you want to spend Holley money? What is it? Doesn't it just reinforce the idea that more NA power is more boosted power? It is. That's the point that we made in the video. But that's not the only thing. We know that more NA power will equate to more boosted power. The question is, can you, like, if you want to get to 1,000 horsepower, you make a 500 horsepower motor, and then all of a sudden at 14.7 pounds of boost, you're making 1,000 horsepower. But if you start off with a 430 horsepower motor because all you did was put a cam in it, that means you're not going to get there at 14.7 pounds. But you will get there at 18 or 19 or whatever the new number is, and you can still get there because the turbo still has flow to do that. So you can still make it there, and you didn't have to port the heads. So the question now isn't whether porting works, because we know that it does. The question is, should you do that because you could have just gotten there just by turning the boost up, which is a lot less expensive and a lot more problematic. Although I would argue that on these LS applications, and this is for the do-it-yourself kind of guy, that if you're taking the head off and you're going to put ring gap in it anyway, which you should be doing, because you're running lots of boost and you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower or whatever the number is for any length of time, you should know what the ring gap is. And if you're going to take it apart and know what the ring gap is, you should change it to something that's going to be more applicable for a turbo application. If you're going to go through that and the heads are already off, just do a little bit of work on them. Let's see. Richard, why don't you do a stock long block LY6 with gap rings? Are they similar to the 350? I don't remember what year you were asking about anymore now, but was it the 4.3 liter? If it's the 4.3 liter, then that's basically 3/4 of the V6. And has really done any max effort 532 big block 4-inch stroke testing? He wouldn't have built motors like that, but somebody else may have. Somebody else may have brought that kind of stuff in. I don't know specifically about a 532. Is that a standard deck or is it a tall deck? What is it? Maybe what's his name? Mike Miller does some pretty high horsepower stuff. Funny thing about living in the upper Midwest is I have never had to evacuate because of a snowstorm. Mark, have you seen those heads? Then they're. I know that they're from China. Everybody has bad experience with them. Core shift, cracking, dumping, teasing guys left and right. Okay, that's not good. I had to leave my house for 3 days in February when the power failed. You didn't have a generator, even a little hand start one, so you know at least you can watch HBO. What pistons are best for NOS? We run nitrous on every kind of piston, from a stock one from the wrecking yard to any kind of forged piston. You can get a hold of the later heads from Mexico. They have good low silica casting. They're on the TBR. Are they on the only on the NA ones, or are they also on the turbo ones? Couldn't a ported head produce more low-end torque and faster spooling? It depends. Does the ported head help the low-speed power? That's not always the case, but if it does, if it helps low-speed power, then it will help spool. If it doesn't help low-speed power, it probably won't. Yeah, if you want more spool, nitrous is definitely a good way to go. Is there a parameter we can figure out that triggers a must? No, there's no must. That's actually going to be a personal decision. You're going to decide to do that. Because like I said, in that range, for 1,000 horsepower, I don't recommend it. It's not needed. You just, like on an LS, particularly on other applications, we'd have to have a different discussion about that. But on an LS, because like on a 5-liter Ford, you're not trying to get to 1,000 horsepower. that's never the number. But on an LS, we just throw 1,000 horsepower numbers out there like it's nothing. But if you're trying to get to 1,000 horsepower, you just put a cam and a 5.3 and springs and head studs and ring gap, and then you put a VS Racing 7875 Gen 2 or an S475 or an S480, and then away you go. You just run the boost up, and then you make 1,000 horsepower. It's pretty easy. You don't have to port the heads. You don't have to do any of that. But if you're trying to make a lot of power beyond that introductory 4-digit power level, then porting the heads, I think, starts becoming beneficial. I just had a 484 built to 496, installed my 77 Monte Carlo with a turbo 400 trans. That's all good. What should I do for better power? I don't know what you did to the 496. Is it so you had rebuilt stock heads? Are the stock heads oval ports? Are they rec ports? Are they peanut ports? How much camshaft do you have in it? What intake do you have in it? Ruben, I always follow you and consult with you on projects in progress. I am from Venezuela, but I'm in Florida. Well, hopefully you're okay being in Florida. But yeah, I think I have probably sent you my email, right? But I'll put it up right here if you want it. But if you have a question, you can ask it here, and I can answer it live. That way we don't have to worry about conversing over email. Are there any offshore manufacturers you wouldn't use? Yeah, I've seen some stuff online that I wouldn't, and we went over this in one of the live feeds. There's stuff from various places, just those particular pieces that I won't use. Like an intake manifold, I normally would, because it's hard to get that really wrong. I don't know about the carburetors. I'd be a little skeptical with some of that stuff. The valve train stuff seems to be kind of a no-go. I've had good luck with rods and things like that. Goes to 11, you're going to put an LV3 and a WRX. That's going to be a much better motor. And the taper shroud 782 is such a minute difference in the bowl, you almost can't see it. I'm going to be interested to see when we do the porting or do the flow testing first on both the 782 and then the G head, the OG head, and then when we do ported versions of both, it'll be interesting. If taken apart for ring gap, I'd go to the effort of decking the head and getting a good valve job. That's a good valve job is important. Usually the factory stuff a lot of times is just like a one angle deal, and it's not optimum, obviously. I'm hoping after talking to Turbo Monza, you guys can let me know what you guys think. They're going to do a multi-angle valve job in the 3800 stuff and see if that's going to help flow. So what do you guys think? Do you think from the factory valve job, which is what was there, do you think that a multi-angle valve job will help the flow? And if it does, is it just going to help low lift flow? Is it going to help flow everywhere? Is it going to make more power? And then what happens if we put a bigger valve in it? Like I want to put a bigger intake valve in it. What power level have you personally seen live? Well, I don't have to see it live because I have been testing it live for the last 30 years. And if you take a look at the Big Bang stuff that I have up on the channel, you'll see that we did 1300 with a stock bottom end 5.3. We did 1200 with a stock bottom end 4.8, and then did 1540 with a stock bottom end 6 liter. So you can run, you can make more power than you'll be able to put down, because as Dan was saying earlier, he pointed out, and we've talked about this many times, that making the power is easy, but harnessing that power is a different thing. There's not a lot of guys out there that can take a 1500 horsepower motor and use all of that 1500 horsepower going down the track, because a 1500 horsepower motor is fairly inexpensive to do. You know, it's not dirt cheap, but it's fairly inexpensive. But a $1,500 transmission is big money, and a $1,500 rear end is big money, and the drive shaft and the brakes and the axles and the suspension and the aero and all of that stuff is, it's real money when you get up into that power level. Are offshore cylinder heads any good? I don't know. I think it would be an individual basis thing. A 32-degree back works better. Multi-angle valve jobs, if done correctly, will help flow everywhere. Especially important is a back cut of 20 degrees on the intake valve. Since orders coming, shame on you for trying to drive a 1,500 horsepower car in the snow. I remember driving my Mustang with the blower on it, and it was even a centrifugal blower. But I remember driving it on, if anybody knows what these were from back in the day, a BFG TA. I think they were R1s, so they were ultra soft compound tires, and they were also worn out because I would race them a lot. And driving those in the rain was pretty diabolical. Well, Mark, his comment was, my friend, I used to respectfully disagree. And see, I like that. You should be able to have those kinds of conversations with your friends. Respectfully disagree about the potential of the 287 versus a 782. After studying cylinder head design for a couple of years, I'm in agreement with them on Team 782. The one thing I would say is studying head design is not going to tell you which one of those heads are better. They could tell you which one you think is better, but we need to test it. That's why I want to find out. I want to find out, we want to run a stock head. I want to just do a back-to-back head swap on both of those, obviously with the same cam and stuff. I think that the chambers are different size on those, so we're going to see a compression difference, and then guys are going to argue about that. And then we're going to see on ported versions of both of those too. I myself tend to like the roller cam better, and I know that we can put the roller cam in the earlier head. I also like the roller cam with the oil squirters that come in the slider cam head. I think that that's a better combination. Having oil on there is a really good idea, especially for what we're going to try to do with it. I'd like to see which one of those works the best. I'd like to see what kind of airflow we can get, and I'd like to see what kind of, the other thing that people disagree with on those 2.2s is the benefit of camshafts. It seems to kind of be that people are thinking ported heads are okay, that they work, but that you don't do anything with camshafts, and camshafts are where you're going to make all your power. Don't know much about them, just Edelbrock intake, 2 liter, rec port heads, mild cam. Don't seem like I have much more power than the factory through a 5. How much power do you think an NA motor like this would make? A 496 should make a lot more, excuse me, than a 454 should. Buddy Ingersoll passed away. He was a real turbo guy. The Ozman, you don't have a turbo motor yet? Just add a turbo to whatever. Like, I want to put one on the GoPed. Lots of STAC drag racing to analyze. The problem with that is that you don't see like back-to-back stuff. Here's what happens in racing, having been in racing, especially in road racing and stuff. But when somebody sees somebody have something on their car, a new wider tire, a new wheel offset, a new brake, whatever it is, whatever the neatest, latest, greatest thing is, they see them have it, and then they did that. Especially, heaven forbid, the guy does well, and he has the new thing on there, and he does well. Everybody then goes and gets that. Well, that might not be why the guy did well. It might not be the trick new carbon fiber rotor or brake ducting or whatever the change was, or new external valve shocks or whatever the thing is that everybody wants. It might not be that. It might be that the guy just out prepped you and is working harder than you are. Wondering if my gains from ported 862s on a 6-liter would be a waste of money. You want to ported 862s on a 6-liter are a good idea, because that's not enough. That's not enough cylinder head for a 6-liter. With changing valve angle, I don't know how you do that other than angle milling the head. Got stuck in the rain with my slicks once. Made it for a mile. Yeah, I've driven slicks in the rain. I drove my Hoosier dirt stalkers, which were amazing in the rain. The problem actually happened when they dried up. Then they just overheated. Oh, Buddy Ingersoll died in March. 2012. That was a long time ago. See how our poll is doing. 60% are saying yes, they do run a ported head or heads on their turbo motor. I'm part of that 60% because the Sprint turbo that I had we did head porting on it. And I've run lots of ported heads on turbo motors on the engine dyno, certainly. I'm trying to think the Mustang had ported heads. It didn't have a turbo on it. It had a Vortex on it. Hoosier and Yokohama are working a deal to merge companies. Going to call it Hoosier Mama. Yeah, that's funny. I ran Hoosiers. They work really well. And then the Yokohamas, the A008Rs and RSs or whatever back in the day, and the Goodyear GSESs. That's how far back it was when I was running the Mustang. I have to call around for pricing on porting. For most, well, certainly for the LS stuff, if that's the one we're talking about, you can do what I did. It's very, very easy, because if I can do that, anybody can. I believe there is something to Rob Walsh's porting style for the 650. What is a 655? A008Rs, that's right. They were pretty good tires. Ran out of talent. That happens. Oh, the first 2.2 head. I'm trying to remember what the head was that was on the 84 that I have. I don't remember what the casting number was. Gigantic silly intake ports. Should have been a 445. Ported 799s or 823s on a 6-liter if you later plan on added boost. Take a look at the video that I have up of, well, I didn't do ported ones. I did stock ones. So a stock rec port head is going to make more than a 799 does. If you port the 799s, they'll make more than a stock rec port does if you do it right, like a professionally ported set. If you then port the 823s, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I don't know that those are going to get, maybe they'll get to be as good as the ported Cathedral ports. They're certainly going to lose low speed power compared to the Cathedral ports. I don't know if they get even with the ported 799s or a good set of ported Cathedral ports. We ran 225s. I don't know if the ported ones, the ported rec port heads will get up to that, or if they surpass that. I just don't think that they will. We ran Trickflow 205s on the 5.3 and the 4.8 stuff, yes. Would the factory rear end or gearing be contributing to or restricting my power since it came with only with a 305? I don't know what your gearing. Do you know what your gearing is? Are on your 305. So maybe did I answer the question wrong? I thought you were talking about running a big block at a 496. I haven't watched everything yet. Is there a maximum percentage of the valve bowl you can remove before you really mess it up? I don't do percentages. I just did it by eye. I just didn't take out very much. All I did was smooth out the transition, basically just swirled the thing around a bit to make it smooth, and then take out any big edges. And then it looked like it had a fairly nice transition from the edge of the seat, the valve seat, into the bowl. That's it. I didn't do anything elaborate. .317s ended up on a 404 twin GT45s, 92 millimeter, good or bad. That will work fine. We ran 317s, ported 317s on one of the Big Bang motors, and it made 14 to 1500 horsepower. So that's about where those GT45s could be if everything else is right on there. Ported 823s will destroy ported 243s according to flow numbers. They flow a lot more, but I've run those two heads back to back on NA motors and not seen that. So that's why I say that. And also the fact that you have a ported set of rec port heads that flow 350 CFM or 360 CFM, whatever the number is, and you don't have enough motor to take advantage of that, you get no gain from that. Funny bones, you install the 496. So if you had a 305 and you put a 496, it should not be just a little bit faster. It should be like mind-bogglingly faster than a 305. I opened the hood of one of my cars today, and a mouse looked at me like I was invading privacy. We had that happen when I was at the car farm. We were going around seeing an endless amount of really super cool 2.2 turbo cars, and we lifted the hood on one of the cars, and it wasn't a mouse, it was a rat. It was pretty good size. Stuck his head out of one of the air cleaners that he had made into his own little apartment and looked at us, hey, what's up? It's pretty cool. What's the best way to do a DIY head test? You could do it with a vacuum cleaner, or you're going to have to hook something up, some sort of manometer or something to get some sort of, so that you could duplicate the amount of draw you're doing. Just pulled the 305 and 350 trans and put it in a 496 with a 400 trans. Yeah, that should be miles faster than the small block motor combination. Aaron, I have no concept of what 1/8 mile times are. I don't know what that, if you could tell me what that equates to in a 1/4 mile, I can have a fairly good idea, but there should be calculators for that already. You were running a GT45 and the data log showed 21 pounds. Well, if you're running 21 pounds on a Magnum, that's making a lot of power. DIY flow bench. Get some Amtech vacuum motors. Usually works for most smaller heads and makes some manometers. Yep. Two more minutes. Jaybird, polish the chamber too. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And you can't mess that up. You just make it smooth. You can learn plenty about air intake flow with vacuum and a piece of string. That's true, right? And if you got really good with flowing it and listening to the noise, you can also get a pretty good ear for that kind of stuff. So wait, changing from 317s to 862s has no effect on a 6-liter. Yes, it does. I have that video up. It definitely makes more power. But it made more power primarily because we changed the compression by almost a full point on that. And also on the one that we tested on, the 862, or this was a 706, I think, also has enough flow to support the power level that we were at. 317 will ultimately flow more, but it just has to overcome such a big deficit and it also has a bad chamber design. Not just big, it's not very good. What's your take on Vortex Superchargers versus Whipples? I've seen on your video, Vortex don't sound bad to stick on a 6-liter. A Vortex is a different style of supercharger. I wouldn't, the manufacturer is not the important thing. They're different styles. One of them is a positive displacement twin screw supercharger. That's the Whipple. The other one is a centrifugal supercharger. If you look, I have videos up of what the difference between those two is and the power curves that they provide. A Whipple will provide a much more consistent boost. It will have more boost earlier than a centrifugal will. The centrifugal will be more efficient at the top of the rev range, but you have to wait till you get there. So in a drag race where they were both running 10 pounds, the Whipple would win the race. What kind of horsepower do you think a mild 496 should make? It should easily make at least 500 and probably a little more if it has a decent cam in it. Mexico City's in the house. And Aaron, after you go to the Wallace Racing calculator, let us know what that is. On my Turbo 464 valve, I just did the exhaust. I basically matched the later 0304 ports, port matched my intake, the lid to match my twin 65mm throttle body. See, the way that I feel about head porting is the same way that I feel about camshafts. The intake on the camshaft, the intake duration number, and to a lesser extent the lift, are way more important than the exhaust. And to me, the intake port on the head is way more important than the exhaust is. Ozman, thank you very much. Do you know how reflected waves behave when they're opposing each other? A lot of times they are, but that's not how the wave acts. They're not hitting each other really. Any experience with the C4 like a Corvette? Yeah. Yeah, is it I hope it's a I hope it's an 84 Crossfire because that'd be really cool. But if it's an L98, that would be good too. Yeah, I'm hoping it's not a C4 Trans because I don't have any experience with that. What do you think about blending E85 and 87 to combat fuel costs? As long as you can get your tune to accept it. James, James just stepped it up. He just prices right. He prices right. You, Ozman. That's funny. Let's see a test on Ellis with a distributor versus a coil pack. See, I've had lots of people ask about that. They've asked about, hey, I want you to put the distributor adapter nonsense on an LS. No, I'm not going to do that. That is one product that I have no idea why anybody would have ever even come out with that, because they already have coil packs, which are good and wholly unnecessary on most LS applications. You don't need coil packs on a naturally aspirated LS. We don't need coil packs on a big block. We've made way into the 4-digit power levels with big blocks and small blocks with a distributor. It works just fine. Coil packs are better. But again, like we were talking about with the ported head thing, where are they better? At what point is that? What point does that become like mandatory or even beneficial? But I don't know why on an LS you would ever try to have that front drive to put a distributor on it unless you like the way that it looked, because it's not going to do anything for you. And there's already such an easy thing to plug into the factory coil packs with the MSD like ignition controller. You just plug that in and plug it all in, and you put your carburetor on there and it immediately fires up. And then you can do all the stuff to your curve that you couldn't do to your distributor. You could recurve it and do all that. It's just fantastic. I know he did. He upbid him. You're actually on right now. It's a friend of mine's car that ran tonight. It was very impressive. That is pretty good. I want to build an autocross car. A C4 Corvette is like a whole nother level of handling versus cars that came out around that era. I'm running E85 to 87 since May. It saves about 10% over running premium. Oh, good. James can outbid anybody. Oh, he's throwing it down. He's drawing the line in the sand. Racer D, I play second in end masters with an LS and a distributor. Did you have to run the distributor on it? Like, I don't know why anybody would do that. 50% E85 with 87 seems to be the most economical blend in my Buick. Did you have to, Andy, did you have to retune that compared to just running? Like, I just run 87 in it. But E85 would be better. I have thrown some E85. A lot of times we have some left over when I'm running E85 on the engine dyno, and we take it out and then flush it with regular gas. And then we'll take the mixture of stuff and I'll just dump it in the truck and just drive. I'm just driving around, never racing it around anyway. So I figured it's just tank volume is what I'm looking for. It's about the cool factor. Some of us want to look old school. See, that's what I mean. If you like the way that it looks, I'm all for that. I just want to know what the answers are, though. Thanks to James and the Ozman. I'll always appreciate it. I'll make sure to get Lisa a nice frosty cold beverage. Dan, what year Porsche intake are you guys talking about? Because I want to see what a cutaway looks of that. My truck sounds like Chewbacca from 2,500 to 3,000. See, that's like a description that we all can get behind, that we all understand. Oh yeah, I know exactly what Chewie sounds like. Racer D, I know that you ran a carburetor on it, but a carburetor you still run with an ignition controller and all the coil packs. You don't have to run a distributor to run a carburetor. That's not necessary. That's what I'm wondering, why you would have chosen a distributor. I was originally looking for an IROC, yeah, which is not going to handle nearly as well as a C4 Corvette does. The prices were pretty close, so why not get a Corvette? Plus, you get to wear the members only jacket and the gold chains and the driving gloves without the fingers on them. Oh, that's right. The LHU engine is flex fuel, so you're all good. Banks, you have the same year and model GM truck that I have and has a battery drain issue. Have you ever had this problem? I haven't on mine. Does anybody know he's got an 02 Silverado that the battery's draining? Is your alternator going bad? Is the voltage regulator bad? Is it got a short from a bad ground or something? James, don't tempt him. He'll do it. He's crazy like that. Let's see. I must have put information wrong because it's showing 437 horsepower. It's not the number that they're giving you is not at the tire, Aaron. It's actually at the flywheel. That doesn't seem like it's right. Starting at 94 or so, certainly any of the 2000s NA Porsches have those intakes. 2 cross tubes, one of which had a vacuum controlled valve. So aren't they just changing if they have a cross tube between the two plenums, aren't they just changing the plenum volume, or are they doing more than that? More Gen 2 LT1, I agree. I do need to do the 302 version of that. Michael at Ice and Ignition is a good friend of mine. See, that's like a good answer. That's a good answer, Dave. I like that. Please test P engines if you can. As long as that P doesn't stand for Porsche, because that's not... I have junkyard LS money. I don't even really have junkyard big buck Chevy money, but Porsche stuff is... Let's see. Aviator glasses too. That's right, on the Corvettes. That's right. But the thing is, if you get a C4 Corvette, you have to read up on all of the things that your Corvette has that nobody else. This is one of only 17,000 red Corvette, automatic, and then you've got to start listing all of these option delineations that narrow it down to where yours is the only car that was ever made like this. $4,200 Calvin's running is impressive in person. It looks good in the photos I've seen of it. Are the 5.3s out of a 2015 1500? Is a 2015 an L83? I think that's an L83, right? I don't remember when they changed it over. It's not settle down, Francis. It's lighten up, Francis. Come on. The solder on the instrument panel migrates and causes drains on that era Silverado. So did they change the whole instrument cluster for that? It's just been like 15 minutes. This is car guy talk. I would totally rock a C4 Grand Sport. Yeah, gold chains and everything. You use the fact that it's 180 degrees to the engine to allow the column of air to compress the air on the other side. They'll open and close the valve too, depending on RPM. Oh, okay. I'll have to take a look at it and see. C1 Corvette was fuel injecting with a power glide. They only made 3 of them, 3 out of 9,000 this year. It's a C1, so is it if it's fuel injection, is it a 57? What year is it? There you go. There's a light now, Francis. You want a C4 with a 351? That'll make people happy. But you'll be able to push the motor back further because you don't have to worry about the distributor. Gold chains, Adidas jogging suit, unzip the. you gotta have the like fake stick-on chest hair thing. Oh, 59. Okay. Early C3 convertible with vinyl covered hardtop. And I'm going to close out our poll at 61% saying yes, 39% saying no. You run ported heads. Even my Chevy Sprint Turbo had a ported head. I don't know where you guys are at. Yep, Dan, you got a Mr. T starter kit. But you can still pity the fool. I really likes me some Mr. T. Clubber Lang. The poll answer is yes, you should always have ported heads. The poll answer is, do you have it? So only you get to answer that for yourself. Imagine Richard wearing a hair-up, button-up shirt, elbows up, side to side. Dude, I will go all elbows up, side to side. That's one of my favorite songs, too. You don't need boost to enjoy the benefits of ported heads. No, that's what we talked about. If you run ported heads and it helps the NA power and you stop there, you've already helped the NA power. That you're good. Oh, that's right, Dan. All on the Porsche, you have a whole bunch of jugs. You got to port all of them. 68 Camaro with a Cleveland in it. There were a couple out at the Silver State that had FEs in them. A Royale with cheese. Look at the big brain on Brad. There's rarely a right or wrong answer to the poll. We did have 100%, though. I have video or photographic evidence of it. 84 Z51. That's what I had. I had an 85 Z51 that handled really well. The ride in it was not ideal, but it did handle pretty well. And if I remember right, I think that the 84 Z51 had even stiffer spring rates. I can't remember if they changed it from 84 to 85 or from 85 to 86. It was right there. You want an 83 model? That's going to be hard to find. Yeah, Dan, that's the Corvette ownership thing. '85 had the lower spring rate. So it was '84 was the ultra stiff one, and then they backed off on them in '85. The van on the A-Team was awesome. I like the fact that they had the van again in the movie, the A-Team, and that they had a couple of the guys in it too. That was good. Jay, your chainsaw has a ported head. I kind of want to do a ported head on the Trail 90. I guess I could do the GoPed too, right? Could do a bridge port, peripheral port. I don't think I've ever. I haven't done it ever any mods. I don't think on the two-stroke stuff, except we did do an expansion pipe on the GoPed. 20 minutes later. Starsky and Hutch Torino. I had a friend of mine that had one of those when we were in high school. Rockford's Firebird, yep. Or the Bill Bixby's white Corvette. It was in The Magician, right? And it said Spirit on the license plate. Yeah, we port the heads on a two-stroke. Everybody does that, right? Yeah, once I start reminiscing about the A-Team and my Corvette. McHugh's Trans Am, yep. The Magician, or Courtship of Eddie's Father would be another good one from way back in the day. And on that note, it is time to go. A couple of minutes have already passed. It's Saturday night. I got to go. I don't know, like you guys, I'm not going to do anything. but I am going to go see Lisa, which is more than I deserve. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys all tomorrow. And